All right, guys. Pretty excited about this fun little message right here. This is something that's definitely going to be what I'm going to call a breakthrough sermon. This is a message that's going to help people get to their breakthrough. It's something that's going to fill in the gap. It's something that when you get done hearing it, you're going to be thinking, "Oh, that's the problem. That's what's the holdup. That could be the very thing that's keeping my breakthrough from coming. Oh, okay, I get it now. Let me go to God about this so I can get this roadblock out of the way so I can move forward into my destiny." So I'm very excited about this message, and the name of it is going to be called Seven Nation Army, the Itis. Seven Nation Army, the Itis. Now, Seven Nation Army, that should probably sound familiar to some of you. Some years back, a band called the White Stripes did a song called Seven Nation Army. But what I'm basically saying in this sermon is this. I'm going to show you a scripture. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 7. And God is naming the seven different nations of people that are going to be coming up against, or rather, they're in the territory of the place where He's sending His people, His chosen people, and He's basically saying, "I'm going to move these people, these seven nations of people, out of the way, so that you can enter into your promised land and walk into not only your blessings but your destiny, to be where I originally wanted you to be instead of being in slavery." So what I'm basically saying in this sermon is this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use those seven different nations of people, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use them to represent seven different types of people today that, if they're too much in your life or too attached to you, they can slow you down and keep you from moving forward. They're going to cause you to have the itis, and it'll keep you from moving forward into the things of God. And you might be thinking, what in the world is the itis? Well, let me explain. But like I said, for those of you that are reading along in scripture, I'm only going to be looking at one verse, and it's Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1. But as you're turning there real quick, let me explain. And it's funny, I'm talking about this because I believe it was last sermon I was talking about how I liked English class, because you learned about words and sentence formations and what's the adjective and adverb and noun and verb and all that. Well, it's also in that class that you learn a little bit about what you call prefixes and suffixes. And the best way I can explain this is this. Prefixes are basically like words that are not really normally meant to be stand-alone words. They are words that are usually put at the beginning of other words. So, for example, a popular prefix is the word re, R-E. So if you want to do something, you can do it, but if you do it again, you say you are redoing it. It's a redo. So you took the prefix re and put it in front of do, and it made the word redo. You can play something, but if you play it again, you are replaying it. See? And it's a prefix that means to do something over, to repeat it, to do it again. So with suffixes, it's the same thing, except suffixes are usually at the end of a word, right? And something that is common is itis, I-T-I-S, itis. So, for example, if you have gum disease, they call it gingivitis. If you have stiffness in your hands or knees or whatever, they call it arthritis. If you have an infection that causes inflammation in the liver, it's hepatitis. If you have breathing or lung problems, it's called bronchitis. Okay, so we see all these different itises, and if you notice all these words, a lot of these words that end in itis, these are words that represent bad stuff, bad conditions that we might have, right? Things that are a hindrance to us in some way or another. So, what is the itis? What is the thing that's called the itis? I get that from a TV show, and some of you probably already know this. You're probably already laughing, but let me explain it. It's from a show that was popular years ago. Well, still popular now, actually. But it's a show called The Boondocks. And on this one particular episode, I believe the episode was actually called the Itis, but that's what they were talking about, was the Itis. And what it was this: it starts out, you got the two main characters, the little kids and their grandfather, and they're in their house and they got some neighbors over and they're sitting at the table eating, and they're eating what we call soul food, right? So they're sitting there eating, and all of a sudden one of them starts to fall asleep at the dinner table, right? So everybody said, "What's going on?" And the grandfather is like, "Oh, don't worry, it's just the itis. She just has the itis." And he explains that sometimes when you eat soul food and you eat so much of it, you start to get sleepy, and sometimes you can fall asleep just right where you're at. But don't be alarmed by it. You'll be all right. Just give them a while to wake up. They'll be fine. Well, what ends up happening is later on in the show, the grandfather opens up his own soul food restaurant. Now, here's the thing about soul food: it's delicious, and some of it is pretty good for you, but a lot of it is known for being not so good for you. In fact, listen, some of the things that we call soul food is stuff that too much of it can be pretty fatal for you. I mean, it can cause high blood pressure and clogged arteries and, you know, these heart problems and all kinds of stuff. It can be really bad for you. Some of it is stuff that really shouldn't even be eaten. Some of it is stuff that the stuff that was given to the slaves by the slave masters. Back when, blacks were slaves here in America, the slave masters would give them the leftovers of the pigs and stuff like that they wouldn't eat, and it was bad for them, and that's why they gave it to them, because they had to give them something to keep them alive, but they weren't going to give them the good stuff. And some of that stuff is stuff that is part of the soul food menu, if you will. So it's stuff that's just killing us basically even today. So anyway, back to the show. He opens up the soul food restaurant, and people are coming in, they're enjoying this food, but they keep falling asleep at the tables. So they start putting beds in the restaurant. And when people come up and they order their food, somebody will ask them, "Okay, how long do you estimate that you'll be in here sleeping?" So what they're doing is they're charging you by the food that you get, but they're also charging you based off of how long you're going to sleep in the bed, because they got to make a profit somehow. So, but anyway, so you see people inside the restaurant sitting on their bed eating, then they just lay back and fall asleep on the bed. But anyway, it was just funny. But it got to the point where people got so sick and they were just tired and couldn't go to work because they were just wanting to sleep and eat all the time, and then they got sued, and it was pretty funny episode. But what I'm saying to you is you have to be careful to not catch the itis. There's many itises, but the 7 Nation Army I'm about to show you. Listen, these 7 types of people are folks that if they're too attached for you too long, they're going to cause you to have the itis, or what I call the spiritual itis. In other words, what I mean is it's not an attack on going to sleep. I'm not saying you can't sleep. What I'm saying is it's like a spiritual slumber. In other words, it's like you sleep on God, so to speak. When he moves, you're just kind of like unconscious trying to breathe because, you know what I mean? You're so full of something not good for you. So it'll make sense. Look at this, Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 1. The only verse we got to look at. It says this: "When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and have cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou." So that list of names of these nations, or these groups of people, are 7 nations that, although they're individual, can come together as one mass to hold you back from your destiny. These people would have to be removed from a particular land so that God's chosen people could enter into the land and fully inhabit it the way that God means for them to. So what I'm saying is there's going to be 7 types of people that if you're not already dealing with getting this out of your life, this debris out of your life, it can definitely be a hindrance to fully inhabiting all that God has for you. It will slow you down. You'll be missing out on God, sleeping on God with the itis if you're not careful. So to get the point across, I want to read this verse one more time. But this is what I want to do. If you noticed, these 7 types of people, the last 4 letters of each one is Ites. And even though itis is spelled Itis, Ites looks like it could still be pronounced itis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this verse one more again. And I'm going to purposely pronounce these names wrong. I'm going to pronounce it as if it ends in itis instead of ites. So look at this again. When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. Or I guess I could say 7 itises. So, to get my point across for this message, what I did was I looked into some stuff, and as I've explained before, in the Bible, words and also names, when you go back to the original Greek, Hebrew, or Aramaic that it was originally translated from, you can see the word it's translated from it, but you can also get a definition, a broader definition of what this word meant or the name meant. And sometimes the word that a word in our Bible is translated from, sometimes that word will come from another Greek or Hebrew word itself, and that word would be called the origin word, the word that word came from. So sometimes the Greek or Hebrew word that our words are translated from, sometimes they may be a slightly altered version of a word that came before that one, or a compound word that's made up of 2 other origin words, if that makes sense. So anyway, so what I did was I went and I looked back at some words to see what they meant, and I looked into these names, the names of these different 7 types of people, of nations, and I found some interesting things. The first on the list here in verse 1 is the Hittites, and when I looked to see what that meant, it simply meant at first the descendants of Heth, or Het, which makes sense, the Hittites, they're descendants of a man named Heth. But when you go to the origin word that word is translated from, that word means terror. So when you get down to the root of what the name of these people mean, it means terror. So what I'm saying is, the first of the 7 types of people that you have to be careful of are people that want to terrorize you. In other words, people that want you to be afraid. People that want to, pardon my French, that want to punk you out, so to speak, as we like to say it. People that want you to be afraid of moving forward into the things that God has for you. In other words, people who all they want to do is they want you to be afraid. That's all they want you to do, is be afraid, because when you're afraid, as I've talked about before in a sermon, fear paralyzes you. And if you think about it, it just has the similar effect to having the itis. Why? Because when you got the itis, you ain't going nowhere. Being paralyzed, being asleep with the itis, what's really the difference? You ain't going nowhere. See what I'm saying? So you have to be careful of people that, listen, anytime God gives you opportunities, God gives you a vision or a dream of something to do, or he flat out tells you, hey, do this or do that. And then you have people who all they want to do is tell you, oh, I don't know. I don't think you can do that. I don't think you're ready for that. Da 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 da. And the more you try to tell them, hey, I know that this is my destiny, or I know that God told me I can do this, or I know God told me I can have this, the more they'll get offended instead of being happy for you. They're offended that you are not scared. They can be offended that somebody's not afraid of, you know what I mean? Mad because they're not scared. You know what I mean? Like, what's that about? So be careful of these people. If you have people like this around you, even if they mean well, listen, you might have to upset some folks. You might have to just do what God has for you to do anyway, even if it does offend them and make them mad that they couldn't scare you. We know that the word lets us know that God didn't give us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. God's love perfects our love, and the perfect love casts out fear. In other words, you can't please both. You're not going to be able to please God and please people when it comes to this issue of fear. Either you can let people scare you to death, or you can choose to believe God, but you start trying to ride the fence, you're just going to be sitting there. You're just going to be sitting there paralyzed with the itis, just sitting there. So what I'm saying is, again, if you got to upset some folks by moving forward, no matter what they say, do it. Move forward without them. And if there's such a hindrance to you that you don't know how to quite get around folks like this, listen, get in God's presence and pray on it. Ask God to make a way for you, to remove you from people that just all they want to do is just try to scare you all the time. Don't let fear enter in. Not just the people that try to bring fear, but fear itself. Pray against fear. Pray for courage and boldness. Because the fear did not come from the Lord. He does not want you to have that going into this new season. The next thing on the list, the Girgashites. This is what it says about a Girgashite. When you go back to the word that is translated from that word, it means dwelling on clay soil. Dwelling on clay soil. So, here's what I'm getting out of this. There are people who it's like they are in your soil. And of course, soil is where you get, growth from, plants from, increase from, symbolically. Your harvest. In other words, it's like you're on the verge of reaping a harvest from God, but you got people out there waiting for the harvest to come up so they can try to take it for themselves and take off running, talking about some, okay, see you, bye. Or staying just to get as much as they can before you finally, slap them on the wrist and make them leave. So there's that, but more specifically it says clay soil, and I was like, what is that? So I was like, I'm gonna Google this. And it says something interesting. It said that type of soil can be dry and hard and real brittle but sticky when wet. And I thought, wait a minute, that adds up, because people that are like that are in your soil, so to speak, they're like leeches. They're parasites. They're leeches because when you're moist and sticky, it's easy for them to grab a hold of you and suck and suck and suck from you, take your money, or use you for your money, use you for your resources, which is what they're doing anyway by being all in your soil, taking up your harvest or increase, your resources. So they leech onto you, latch onto you while you're good and moist and sticky, and they suck from you. And then when they've sucked to where there's nothing left and you're dried out and brittle and fragile, or fragile, as they said in that movie, A Christmas Story, fragile. When you're when you're fragile and brittle and dry and nothing left to give, that's when they fall off of you and ready to move on to the next victim. So if you've got people that all they want to do is use, and never, ever want to do anything in return for you or give you anything, And when you're having a hard time, they don't want to come around, and you know what I mean. It's time to remove yourself from that, because what happens is some people, they build their self-esteem off of having these people around them, but you can't allow your self-esteem to be built up by people that are like this, that are these Girgashites, because when you have nothing to offer and it's their turn, they would rather just back up, and you'll be feeling less than, and you won't feel good ever again until they come back. But they're only going to come back if they can deplete you again. So if this is something that's an issue, take this up with God. Or if you feel like you should have already had a harvest or an increase, so to speak, maybe he hasn't allowed it to spring forth because it's not that people are taking from you, but they're going to, and you've got to get the people removed so that when the harvest comes, you're the one that can put your hands in and get what you need, instead of other people already standing in your soil, so to speak, getting what is supposed to be rightfully yours. See where I'm going? So things to take up with God, basically. Next on the list, Amorites. I looked into this, and the word it's translated from means this: a sayer, in the sense of publicity or prominence. Prominence meaning to stick out, to stand out. So what I'm getting out of this for you for this sermon is this: you may have people who are sayers. They love to talk a lot, and they talk a good game, but that's just it. They're all talk. They don't always walk the walk. In other words, they can say a lot. They can promise you a lot to get you to trust them, but they never pull through. Not because things just come up and stuff happens and they can't. It's simply because they never had intentions of doing what they promised or said they were going to do in the first place. They love to get your hopes up to let you down. It's like they get a high off of it. They want people to feel like they can rely on them. They want people to rely on them because it makes them feel good, but they have no intention of fulfilling these promises. So they just say a lot. But here's the other part: not just a sayer, but in the sense of publicity or prominence. Also, what I get out of this is this: you have some people who they love to say stuff about you to other people. It can be true things or false things, but they just love to talk about you and other people. They just love to talk about everything and everybody for publicity, for public attention. Here, there are some people that when you go to certain towns and you talk to people, in a lot of towns, and especially in small towns, you'll hear people say, oh, well, that's the town gossip over there. In other words, they're saying that's the person that if you want to know anything about anyone, you go to that person. They're going to tell you everything about everybody's life story. And they're going to tell it not to help you or to warn you about somebody. They just tell everything about everybody just to have attention, just to be popular, just for publicity. They just want attention. So they can go and say all these different things about you. But here's the downfall. You might say, well, so what? It's free publicity for me. But here's the thing. They'll do it regardless of the cost. So if they know things or they find out things that for you would be a secret, or something of the past that you're trying to let go of, those would be some of the hot topics for them. And so what happens is it makes it hard for you to move forward into things, because you've got these sayers, these Amorites, putting your plans, future plans, secret things out there. And when you try to pursue certain things, they've got folks put in place to block you from doing what you wanted to do, these secret aspirations that you wanted to do or achieve. because they put it out there. So they become roadblocks to you because of their words. People know all the desires of your heart, things that it may take some effort and time to achieve. And because they've told people who may be enemies or don't like you, now your enemies know what your plans are, so they get over here and they're roadblocks. So when you get there and you try to get to achieve something, they're standing in the way. And then you're left wondering how they knew this and that, because of the sayers. That's all they do, is this right here. Just talk. If you've got people like this in your life and you're a talker or a sayer with them, and you do this type of stuff for entertainment and publicity, not only would it be a good idea to repent, but it would be a good idea to detach yourself from this, because yeah, these people can be a hindrance to you, but you being a part of it and entertaining it can also be a hindrance. In other words, they may not be talking about you, but because you're in all this mess with them and you're causing troubles for others, it could be holding up your blessing, because you're purposely doing stuff that's going to block blessings for other people. So therefore you cancel out your own. And what happens is when something good does come your way, you sit there and say, oh, well, see, I'm still blessed, but you don't understand. There are legit blessings that could be coming to you. In other words, bigger and greater and more amazing than what you did get. But you'll never know, because you continue to be a roadblock for someone else. So this is another thing to take up with the Lord. Next thing on the list is Canaanites. When I looked this up, it meant descendants of Canaan, which makes sense. But then going further into root words, origin words, it can mean zealous, which can be a good thing, especially if you're zealous for God. Also, it can mean a merchant, a trader, or a trafficker. Now, these don't necessarily have to be bad things, but in this particular case for this sermon, it's bad because these types of people, the thing that they're trading and selling and bartering is you. You're the one that's up for auction. Oh goodness. You're the one that's up for auction. You're the one that's up for sale. You're the one being bidded over. In other words, what I'm saying is these people are going to sell you out. Kind of like how Judas did Jesus. Judas was someone who was close to Jesus, but he looked for opportunity to turn his back on Jesus for a profit. And so he told the people that were against Jesus, okay, I can lead you to him at the right place at the right time for you guys to capture him without the public seeing, so that they don't look at you in a bad light, so that you can secretly take him away and set him up for trial and set him up to be crucified. But you can look innocent, like you've got clean hands and a pure heart. I can do that. I can do this for you, but I need something in return. And so they gave him so much silver to sell Jesus out. These people, these Canaanites, will sell you. They'll trade you off, so to speak. In their mind, they treat you like an object that's on the market. And this is also where things like blackmail and extortion come in. Oh boy. Let me put it to you this way. You know how some celebrities go through this thing where, they're becoming famous and they're making all this money and they get to know all these people, and, it seems like all these people like them. And so they're making all these connections and they get to a point where they feel like they can trust certain people. But there are some folks that are only getting close to the celebrity for gain. In other words, they're getting close to them to try to find fault. And when they get proof of this fault, They can either sell it to the media and tabloids for money or something, or they can take that proof of something and hold it over their head and say, okay, I caught you in something, so now I got control over you, so you got to do what I say or give me what I want, or else I'm just going to expose this on my own. I'm not even going to give it to the media. I'll put you out there and blast myself, and then in the process, I'll make myself famous. I'll become famous off of your spiral down out of fame, if that's what it takes. So that's how a lot of times stuff happens, where people come across sex tapes that weren't meant to be released, and then they find tapes of these celebrities messing around with folks, and then they give it to the media, and then they start talking about it on TV and on the internet and in the magazines and, on the radio and everything. And people go online trying to find the video and download it, give their computer a virus, give their computer a virus, try to download. That makes me think of like LimeWire and Kazaa, however you pronounce it. Y'all know them old old music downloading programs you could download on your computer, and you be trying to download music for free, and then computer starts slowing down, and it's just like, what? Remember that back in the day? But anyway, off subject. But anyway, just something funny I threw out there. But that's what happens. That's what happens. So they do this stuff. They find dirt on a famous person once they get close to them, and they have the intention of doing this in the first place, pretending like, hey, I care about you. I know it's hard being famous. You don't know who you can trust. You can trust me. And then that famous person trusts them, and and then they do them in. They get pictures of them doing drugs or doing some type of illegal activity, and they're ready to sell them out. And they know they can get something out of them because they don't want to lose. They don't want to lose their position. They don't want to lose their fame. They don't want to lose their chances to be in TV shows and movies, or cross over into music, or doing this or that. And then you got people that marry somebody famous for the purpose of waiting till after they get married and acting a fool just so they can have a divorce, just so they can take half of everything. See what I'm saying? So you've got these people, these Canaanites, the merchants and traders and traffickers, who they're trading you for something else. They're getting something, whether it be money or whether it be their moment to have their 15 minutes of fame. Some people might say, look, it could be this. It don't even have to do with somebody famous. You could just be a regular old person, and you've been blessed with the opportunity to own your own business, and somebody comes up and says, hey, I got this picture of you, and if people see this picture, they're going to look at you in a bad light. So if you don't want me to expose you, you got to sign your business over to me, or you got to sign a contract saying that I own a certain percentage of it. You own the most of it, which means you got to do the work around here, and I don't have to be here, but I have to get so much percentage of your earnings. Okay, bye. So this is something to watch out for. You got sneaky people like this in your life. You might want to detach before God starts blessing you, because boy, ooh-wee. Don't tell people like this your secrets and personal business. They're going to purposely just start doing some mess. So now moving on to the next in the group, the parasites. It means village dweller. People dwelling in villages. Doesn't sound bad, but for the purpose of this sermon, this is what it represents. It represents people who are dwelling or camping out in places or positions, and it's a hindrance to you from fully receiving your territories. In other words, they're on your stomping ground and they're taking up too much space, but they're not going to help you move forward to progress these stomping grounds. So they're going to weigh you down. So it could mean different things. It could mean, you having a high position, a leadership position at your job, or even owning the place, or anything of that nature, whether it be people in your own home or people, at a school or whatever. But you go to these places where God is wanting to give you favor, and there's such a dead weight. They won't leave, but they won't contribute to what you're trying to do. So maybe you're in this company, whether you're, like I said, in a leadership position or you're over it, and you're trying to make all these changes, and you want things to get better, and you have all these ideas on how to impact the community, and all kinds of stuff. But you got people under you who they're there, they don't want to help out. They don't want to do anything. They want to be lazy, and they just want to complain about everything. And so what happens is the more you try to move forward and the more you impact and influence people under you to get on board with your ideas, you have these people, these parasites, who literally are just dwellers. They're just chilling. They're just there. They won't leave. They won't quit. They won't move. They won't stay away. They're always there in your territory, whatever place that God has for you to spend a lot of time in impacting, but they won't help. They hinder. So they're literally slowing down your processes just by being there, because they're not going to get on board with anything. So they're just a waste of space, a waste of time. They're slowing you down. They're dead weight. And for some of you, it's not even that if you get in a place, you're going to have people that are going to be a hindrance. For some of you, you may have these parasites who, because they're in certain positions, you can't even get your foot in the door of certain places because they're in your spot. They're in your spot already. But listen, they don't have the favor to be there. They don't have any experience to be there. They don't have any talents to have that position or area that they're in. So they really shouldn't be there, but they're just there. So them being there and not leaving, it's not anything personal against you per se, but they're just not going to leave because them being where they are is beneficial to them. Even though it's unbeneficial to you, they don't care. So if you got people who are dead weight, who are in certain places where God wants you to go in and make some type of an impact, and they won't leave, but they won't do what's right in the place while they're there, this is an issue for sure to take up with God. Because you got to be careful what to do and what to say dealing with these people, or else things could turn real ugly. People turn their back on you. Well, they were here first. You shouldn't talk to them that way. Just crazy. Even though the same people that'll say this stuff to you when you're not around, they talk bad about that person. They just lazy. They don't do nothing. But then when you try to say something about it, well, you ain't got room to talk. You ain't been here that long. Even though really they agree with you. They'll agree with you and still go off on you because you've only been there for 5 minutes. So anyway, that's something to take up with God about. Definitely get into prayer about this. Next on the list is something that seemed similar to the parasites, but actually different. The Hivites. And why I say it sounded similar is because when I looked into the word it's translated from, it's villagers, which sounds like village dwellers. But then when I saw that there's an origin word, I looked into what that origin word meant, and it means things like this: living place, life giver, and there's more, but I'm going to pause there and talk about this. So these are people, the Hivites, these are people who is not so much about places, it's about lives in the places, and your life as well. In other words, these are people that are in places, in territories that God wants you to go into. And the problem with them is that, I'll put it to you this way. As I said, the parasites, their issue is nothing personal against you. They're just worried about how something benefits them. These people, the Hivites, it is a personal thing. See, they are where they're at, not even because they want to be there. In fact, They might be there and it might not even be beneficial to them to be there. It may be somewhat uncomfortable for them to be where they're at, but they're purposely planted there by the enemy to disrupt you. They're purposely there. It is a personal issue. Why? Because they don't want you to bring life into these places. It's not really the place, it's the bringing of life and how you impact lives and how it will, uplift your life, how it will enhance your life. Jesus came to give us life and life more abundant. These people want to do the opposite. They're the thief. They don't want your life to be enhanced. They don't want you to get into this place where you feel like you're making some type of a difference because you might feel better about yourself. You might feel like you've got purpose now, and the enemy doesn't want you to feel like you have purpose. He wants you to go back to living that miserable life where you just lived day to day and paycheck to paycheck and not much was really going on. So, number one, they're there in the hopes of keeping you from living your life to the fullest, because you being there is going to enhance your life. Number two, you being there it'll help you to enhance other lives because you get to minister Jesus to these people, and it will enhance and enrich their lives, which is something the enemy doesn't want. But also, it's not even just about your life and the lives of others. It's about what you will birth out. This is another thing with these people. They don't want you to birth out anything. And I don't necessarily mean literally actually giving birth to an actual literal baby. What I mean is this. When God works on you, and he works on you, and he works on you, and he gets you ready to walk into your destiny, it's like you're going through a birthing process. You have to birth something out, whether it be birthing out a ministry, birthing out a book. Maybe the reason why you went through all the hell that you went through is because God allowed it, but he kept you and saved you for such a time as this to write a book that would be sold in many different places, that would reach a lot of people who need to hear or read what you have to say because it'll set them free. So maybe it's something like that. Or just different types of things, different things that God may want to birth out of you, something that's going to impact people you don't even know, you don't even see. And because of this, the Hivite type people come up against you, your life, the lives of the people you impact, and the life that you birth out, whatever you birth to life. But also to the definition was also this. Also, besides living place, life, and life giver, also on the list was the first woman and wife of Adam. So not only is it an attack on the enhancement of your life, the enhancement of other people's lives in certain places, an attack on the life that you birth out, so to speak, but it's also about attacking the life and well-being of your relationships, whether it be friendships, family, but especially marriages, whether it be keeping people from getting married or whether it be attacking people that are already married and causing a wedge between them so that they'll want a divorce. This is something that destroys people that come in to purposely try to destroy families, people that purposely try to split up divine connections. Why? Because sometimes God joins people together, whether it be friendships, marriages, or even whether it be people that are related that for years didn't even know they were related, and all of a sudden they connect and they birth out something. Something happens. He does a mighty work in them. So these people have to destroy, basically what it sums up is divine connections. You, the people you impact, but the people you connect with divinely to make things happen. Sometimes God has to bring different people together that he has put different gifts and talents and abilities in to work together as a team for a bigger picture. And this is when stuff can really get done, because when you've got these humble people that are simply, they feel honored to just be used by God. These people are not the type of folks that feel like the spotlight has to be on them all the time about everything. And they don't mind giving credit where credit is due, and they don't mind complimenting someone else, and they don't mind other people receiving compliments besides just them. Come on. These people coming together to do something amazing is a threat to the kingdom of darkness. So these types of people, these Hivites type people, this is what they come up against. The life and the birthing of life, so to speak, of great things that God wants to do in you and through you. And finally, the last type of people on the list, the Jebusites. When I looked it up, it said descendants of Jebus. But then when I got down to that root word, bus, it means things like to trample over, to be trodden down, to tread underfoot, or to reject. In other words, these are people who they feel good when they feel like they can treat you any kind of way. They feel good. Listen, they get off on treating you like a doormat. They love feeling like they can wipe their feet off on you and walk all over you. Hence the whole trampling over and being trodden down and treading underfoot. They treat you like you're the territory. They treat you like you are a stomping ground. Like they can just walk all over you. And they expect you to let them walk all over you. And as soon as you decide not to, they reject you. They push you away because they couldn't use you and abuse you anymore, which is the rejection part. And what happens for a lot of us is when we get rejected so much, we have this root of rejection within us. In other words, we expect to be rejected. We are hurt so much by rejecting, we expect to be rejected. And what we don't realize is we get to a place where when we have the root of rejection, we have a fear of rejection, but also an expectancy of rejection, to the point where we basically, whether we realize it or not, we manifest rejection. In other words, we attract people that are going to be rejectful towards us, or those who normally wouldn't will eventually start to reject us and do and say hurtful things towards us. It's almost like when you have that rejection in you, it's like being an antenna that's putting out all these waves and frequencies, and the waves and frequencies are attracting the very thing that we're afraid of, because we put it out there. This is why you have some people who they keep getting in abusive relationships. Have you noticed that? You come across a woman, she was in a relationship with somebody who used to beat on her all the time. Then she gets away from that person. Then she ends up getting in a relationship with somebody and they beat on her all the time. And then she gets out of that relationship. And then she gets in a relationship with somebody that she marries. And then after they get married, he beats on her all the time. Then she gets a divorce. Then she gets, you see what I'm saying? How it's like and she's so sad and upset about it and wondering, why does this keep happening to me? But it's almost like there comes a point where it's almost like she's attracting. In other words, she might not be going after that type, but it's like she has now put off those waves, those frequencies, to draw that in. So this is something to deal with, a double type thing to deal with, not only praying for God to remove these people that love to reject and to walk all over other folks, these users and abusers, for them to be removed, or for those people to be made our footstool to moving up, but also praying against rejection, a spirit of rejection, a fear of rejection, a root of rejection. In other words, if you're someone who's gone through rejection a lot, listen, there may be some heart issues that you might have to pray about, to take things up with God on about. Because if it's a pattern, if it's a cycle, it's something that needs to be broken. Definitely get in prayer with God about that, seeking revelation, seeking deliverance of that. Also, one more thing that was a part of that definition, other than to trample over, to trodden down, to tread under foot, to reject, there was one more thing, and it's to be polluted. To be polluted. To be polluted. And it's funny because late last year I did a sermon, I think it was called Don't You Know That You're Toxic. It was about God removing someone toxic out of your life, or removing toxic relationships. And so it's kind of like this. You know how people use that expression, you make me sick? And they don't literally mean someone is making them sick. The person's just getting on their nerves, so they just say, you make me sick. Well, you might have people in your life who actually literally are making you sick. For real. Just by your spiritual attachment with them. And so with that said, this is something else to pray about. If you're somebody and you're sick in body, and it seems like you have this infirmity that won't go away, it may be an infirmity or some sickness, or it could possibly just be who's attached to you. In other words, once that attachment or that soul tie is broken, all of a sudden it's like you'll be anew again. Whether it be an overnight thing or whether it be a process over some days, you'll start feeling yourself feeling better. All because of that cutting of the cord, so to speak. So this is definitely something to get in prayer about, seeking God on for deliverance from these types of people, from these parasites, from all these people that will give you the itis. In other words, these folks that are going to slow you down and cause you to sleep on God and miss out on what he has for you. And with all this said, I want to wrap this up by mentioning something that's in Psalm 23. It's that very popular psalm where David, he's talking and he's like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. We know that we've heard the psalm 50 gajillion times. But there's one particular verse that I want to mention. I believe it's verse 5. It's the verse where David says, you prepare a table for me in front of my enemies. My cup runneth over. Let me put this image or this thought into your mind. What if Jesus really did put you in the right place at the right time, and he really had a long table set out, kind of like on that episode of the Boondocks? It's not Grandpa serving the food, it's Jesus. Jesus has set the table. He's got food sitting there, and the cup runneth over, and you know it's gonna be good because this is the same Jesus that multiplied the 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. So he's got enough to feed you. If this isn't enough, he can just make more magically appear. So he's got the table set out, and the table is set before your enemies. Your enemies are about to see you have this feast, and you sit down and you start eating, and it feels kind of good because your enemies are watching you relax and chill and get fed and being served and catered to in a way that makes them kind of jealous. And you're sitting there and all these gifts are being brought to you and this and that. And all of a sudden, while all that is happening, all of a sudden you and you're sleeping because you got the itis and you got the Z's. In the cartoons, when somebody's asleep, they have the letter Z, a whole bunch of Z's just floating up over their head. You just got Z's and a little sheep jumping over the fence. You can't fall asleep at the table and then the enemies just come up and take all your stuff and just walk off while you're sleeping. Next thing you know, you wake up, the lights are out. You just still sitting at the table, lights out, no food on the table. They done stole all your gifts. You just see paper wrap sitting there, kind of like on Christmas when the kids open up the gifts and they just throw all the ribbons and paper wrap everywhere. That's the only thing left is just paper wrap of what was. That's it. That is it. No gifts, no tree, no food on the table, no money, no nothing. You're just sitting there in the dark looking for the light, turn on the light, paper wrap there. That's about it. You fell asleep at the table before your, how you gonna fall asleep at the at the table before your enemies? Don't catch the itis. Oh, and one last thing that I thought was funny that I realized right before getting ready to record this. On that last group of people, the Jebusites, where I said that one of the meanings was to be polluted or to make you sick, it made me think of how, you know, in the one of the most quoted things that you hear preachers say is, by his stripes we are healed. And they're talking about Jesus, the stripes that he bore for us during his crucifixion, during his torture. By his stripes we are healed. Well, it's funny because, as I said at the beginning of the sermon, the name of the band that did the song Seven Nation Army was the White Stripes. So, yeah, by his stripes, we are healed. Jesus, in other words, is the answer. Jesus is the answer. Jesus can set a table for you in front of your enemies. He can make a way out of no way for you. And he can increase and multiply and give you life and life more abundant and help you with all your needs and even the desires of your heart. But you can't catch the itis, especially not now. This is not the time to catch the itis. This is the time to seek God more than ever before, to make sure the clutter that is the wrong people are moved out of the way so that you can receive your blessings and walk into your promised lands and begin to fulfill your destiny as you go on your journey with King Jesus. I'll pray us out of here. Heavenly Father, I thank you for another time to minister another word. Lord, I pray that those who may have people that are hindrances in their lives, that they would begin to be honest, be real with themselves about what's going on, and that they would seek you for revelation on who and what is the problem, and that they would open their hearts up to you to receive the help, whether it be you removing obstacles or whether it be us removing people or obstacles, or whether it be just us getting away from people or obstacles. But Lord, let us seek you wholeheartedly so that we can move forward into what you would have for us. This is a time and a season and a year for many to walk into their destinies, and I pray that we all do, and that none of us forfeit what you have, the inheritance you have for us who diligently seek you. And Lord, I give you all the praise, the glory, and the honor. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen.